Free-to-play players are the lifeblood of Rise of Kingdoms, so today I'm going to give you guys my best advice when it comes to which armies you should be investing in Rise of Kingdoms today. The very best commander pairs for free-to-play players, and we'll also go over a couple of potential swap-ins if you have to use something a little bit cheaper, but we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, what's going on, guys? Cheers. All right, now let's jump right into the tier maker here, and the first thing that I want you guys to understand, if you are a free-to-play player and you're coming across this video in 2025, then you probably already know this, but I need to make this very clear. There are three commanders that I think are must-have commanders, and you should be building your account around these three commanders. Now there is a fourth option we'll talk about later in this video, but the three main commanders that a lot of people need to be focusing on right now are: number one, Emperor Qin. Obviously goes without saying if you've been paying attention to the channel lately. Number two, Liu Che. Number three, King Arthur. These are the three sort of pillars of your account in Rise of Kingdoms right now. In my opinion, these three commanders are the single best commander of their respective troop type right now. We have obviously archers, infantry, and cavalry, and I do mean that in that order. I do feel like cavalry kind of are in third place right now, but that probably won't last, to be honest, because for a majority of Rise of Kingdoms meta, cavalry have been number one in the meta. So I mean, right now they're taking a smaller step back, but we'll see. We'll probably see another cav commander before the end of the year, and that might change things, but the point is, these are the three most important commanders to invest in right now. Of these three commanders, there is one commander, that being King Arthur, that I do think you could get away with without expertising them if you have to, right? And let me just be very clear here. Whenever I say that a commander can be used without their expertise, I always get comments saying, Omni, you have to expertise these commanders, you can't afford a field fight without them expertise. And like, look, if I just made every video saying that you have to expertise every commander, then first of all the free-to-play players are going to quit. Second of all, that's kind of a no-brainer. Like, you don't even have to look up a guide at that point. If the answer is just expertise everything, then it's like, okay, well, what, I mean, why even watch a video? Just expertise everything. Like, what's wrong with you? The point is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a free-to-play player, I'm going to assume that you probably don't have unlimited gold sculptures, and yet you probably still want to play the game, right? So like, okay, so let's talk about some things that are, you know, maybe you can get a lot of the value out of the commander, maybe not perfect, maybe not the best, but you can get a lot of the value out of them. And I think King Arthur at 5551 is a really good value investment. Yes, he's better at expertise. Yes, I have him expertise. I do think he's great there, but at a value build, that will be the cheapest of these three commanders in my opinion. I really like the expertise on Liu Che with that extra combo attack. All right, that being said, let's start with King Arthur. Now, I'm not saying that King Arthur is the number one thing that you need as a free-to-play player, but because he is the cheapest of the three, I think this might be the most interesting for most free-to-play players who are watching this video, because again, 5551 gets you his very powerful active skill. It gets you all the stats on the second skill, and it gives you a 30% bonus to either combo or skill damage. The fourth skill is a chance at a rage reduction, and having this at 1 is still nice because you still reduce their enemy's rage by 50. The expertise is quite good, but again, at 5551 you get a lot of the value out of him. All right, so what are some great pairs for King Arthur? Well, like I said earlier, if you're watching this video sometime around December, then you might already know of an upcoming commander that could be really strong with King Arthur. So if it's around that time, pay attention to the channel and subscribe if you don't want to miss that information. By the way, this is not a leak. I don't actually know if we're getting calves in December, but like, based on the release windows, I suspect it would be around there. Who knows? But right now, at the time of recording this, there's a couple of different options you can pick from. First of all, lots of players are using William, and this is because Arthur William works really well, and William can also be used at 5551, and he also has a museum relic. So this is a very budget friendly build right here. Neither commander needs to be expertise, although they are better at expertise. You can use them in the field without the expertise here, and you can expect some pretty good outcomes. Now, another option would be Joan of Arc Prime. She also can be used at 5515, so a little bit harder to get that configuration than William, but she's still pretty good. She gives your allies less rage, but she outputs more damage, and she gives them a 5% damage to their bonus as well. So there's pros and cons here. Obviously, again, William is a little bit easier to obtain, and he's also older, so if you're a returning player, then there's a higher probability you're going to have William at 5551, so you can run this pair right here. Now, if sculptures are not a concern to you as a free-to-play player somehow, then of course you could do something like Philip, right? I think Philip is a great option here. You rock Philip behind the King Arthur. Philip, unfortunately, I do think needs to be expertised, which is a bummer, but that's why I said if sculptures are not an issue to you. But at this point, again, if you're looking to build a really powerful cavalry march right now, I would say maybe shift your focus to other troop types at the moment and come back to calves when their next release comes out, because the Philip pairing might not be best in slot. You might choose whatever the new cav is coming up. All right, with that being said, there are two other commanders that I want to talk about here, and these are the desperation commanders. Okay, these are the struggle builds. All right, I'm just going to be honest, these are not optimal, but if you need to just put something out there, you just got to put an army on the field. You got to put boots on the ground. All right, you got nothing else, times are tough, things are rough, and you're okay with filling your hospital a little bit faster. All right, then let's go ahead and talk about it. All right, Mehmed. He is kind of the jack of all trades. You throw him behind anybody, he's a narrow 5 target AoE. He gives you skill damage, he gives you attack, he gives you a ridiculous amount of health. It is what it is. His latest relic is a tier 3 upgrade, which gives you 40% of health and 10% skill damage. Now here's the thing with Mehmed, right? When you're putting him behind a King Arthur, which you have to do, I know that in theory you would think that you would want him primary, but you don't, because here's the thing: if enemies see a Mehmed primary, they're just going to kill you, right? It's just, you're dead, so don't even think about it. So King Arthur has to be primary here, but that means he's going to be dealing combo damage, so he's not going to be getting the benefit of the skill damage bonus on our boy Mehmed, which is definitely unfortunate. But great news, Mehmed himself is skill damage, so he's going to be boosting his own skill damage by a total of 30%. But your King Arthur will also benefit from the 20% attack, 10% troop capacity, and 40% health, which is actually freaking insane. One of the biggest downsides of King Arthur, and I've absolutely noticed this in my own playing with him, is that he feels really squishy, especially with somebody like William, especially with somebody like Philip. He's just mega squishy. It's just, there's no way around it. It is what it is. So yes, he's got 20% health, but with Mehmed, now you've got 60% health, and you've got a ridiculous amount of health on the cav gear here. It's kind of ridiculous how much you'll have. Now here's the thing: Mehmed has no march speed, but that's why we're talking about him right now with cavalry. Cavalry are a little bit faster in the open field, so you might be able to get away with it. Now again, this is not a pair that I would recommend really. If you can avoid using this, I would avoid using it, because again, there's not perfect synergy. It's a little bit slower, but you can give it a try if you absolutely need to. And in the same vein as that, we have Cao Cao, and I know people are gonna laugh. I know it ain't much. All right, it ain't much, but it's honest work. Why are we talking about Cao Cao? All right, this is once again a commander that is extremely budget friendly, because you get him from the gold keys, and his damage factor and things are going to reflect that. But here's the interesting part about Cao Cao. Okay, first of all, 1700 damage factor to a single target, not much. You've got a 3-second debuff though. The target loses 40% attack. That's actually kind of good. Yeah, it's only one target, but still, I mean, that's a lot of attack to lose. One of the highest attack reductions in the game, to be honest with you guys. Third skill, 30% attack, 10% march speed. Fourth skill is actually a rage engine, 100 extra rage and 1000 healing factor, 10% chance, plus you gain some march speed. We don't care too much about that. But also, if we come into the museum here, we'll take a look and find that Cao Cao also gets 30% health, and like I said, an extra 300 damage factor. So again, when you compare him to Mehmed, I mean, he's got almost as much health, he's got more march speed, he has more attack, he only hits one target, but at least he has a strong debuff there. So again, just remember, I don't want to sell you a hope and a dream here. All right, you're not going to be pulling down those 300-400-500% reports unless you're hitting somebody who's not paying attention. All right, this is a super budget friendly thing. If you're going into your first season of Conquest, you're free to play, you don't know what else to do, you could do something like this. All right, again, if you're a returning player, you would do something like this or something like this, and in a best case scenario, you would do probably something like this. All right, that is going to do it for our cavalry march, and I'm just going to put all of these commanders up here just so you know what we're talking about. All right, next let's talk about infantry. All right, I really like infantry. Infantry are one of my favorite troop types, especially right now. Ever since Liu Che came into the game, it feels like infantry have had a breath of fresh air blown into them, because they've just been pretty good. And right now, the single best pairing that you could do here would be Bai Chi primary with Liu Che secondary. So why is Bai Chi not part of the 3 pillars that I mentioned before? Well, I think point for point, in the long run, I think Liu Che might be a little bit better when it comes to longevity. Why is that? Well, Bai Chi does hit a little bit harder, and he has more total stats. It's attack and health though. Most of it is attack. If we look at Liu Che, he hits a little bit weaker, but he slows down the target so you can stay stuck to them for a little bit longer, and his stat distribution is pretty good. You get 20% defense and you get 20% attack, so it's a little bit less total stats, but I prefer the distribution. And also, you take 20% less skill damage, which right now is very very important with so many Emperor Chins walking around in the open field. He also has an instant proc here, which is pretty good. He also gives more normal damage, and the expertise here is what makes him really shine. You have a 25% chance for an extra combo attack, and the combo attacks can trigger any effect triggered by basic attacks, which makes him very good. And you get extra rage here, so there's a built-in rage engine. All in all, he is just so versatile, and I think because of that, when you look at Bai Chi, he really just has a ton of attack. He hits really hard, and as he loses units, he sort of supplements that with extra damage, so it doesn't feel as bad when you start to lose those troops. But at the end of the day, we don't see any debuffs here. We don't see the combo damage. We don't see the skill damage taken reduction, right? So all in all, I would say, even though Bai Chi hits a little bit harder, I think Liu Che might have a little bit more longevity. However, as I said before, they're best paired together, right? So if you can only expertise one, it's going to be Liu Che, but Bai Chi can also be used as a budget build commander. I would say first two skills are must-haves, right? This is where all of his stats and damage come from. You need those first two skills. Between the last two skills, I prefer the fourth skill here, because the third skill, I mentioned this in my 5551 video, check that out if you missed it, but you still get the 10 stacks of malice here no matter how many points you put into this, and the buff is only for 1 second. So really, your damage factor is getting cut in a third, but it's not that big of a deal. Really, having this stacking is quite nice. And again, you can't guaranteed get this to 5 points, so if you get like a 5533, that's fine as well. All right, so Bai Chi, 380 legendary commander sculptures, and you can get a pretty decent budget build here, which is pretty important for a free to play guide, right? So that is one way to go. But if you don't have Bai Chi, let's say you don't have him, let's say that you used to play Rise of Kingdoms, but you stopped, you quit, you came back, whatever the case might be, well, Liu Che is still a commander that I think is a must-have commander, but there's other things that you could pair with him. First of all, if you have Alexander the Great from back in the day, people still use this pair. They still poke with it. They still get great reports here. This is still the fastest infantry march on the field. If Bai Chi didn't hit so absolutely hard, I would still be using this pairing to this day. Additionally, if you had CPO Prime, you could run CPO Prime here as well. I think a 5551 CPO Prime as a budget build would be great with Liu Che, but again, only if you have him, right? Because if you're going to be investing sculptures into anyone, it's going to be Bai Chi, right? Like, don't get it twisted. But again, if you have him on the account already, you could still run this pair. You have a double AoE pair. Yeah, you miss out on the smite synergy, of course you do, right? But this pairing can still hold its own in the open field today. And beyond that, if you're going to use gold key commanders, then again, I'm going to give you a warning. I'm not selling you hopes and dreams here, okay? You are going to have a tougher time using gold key commanders. It just is what it is. There's no way around it, okay? You have to be extremely careful using gold key commanders, because this is not a secret hack like cheat to get a bunch of kills without investing in command. Like, no, you're using suboptimal things, and so you have to be very careful when you do this, okay? But if you are going to do that, you can look at somebody like Pyrrhus, or you could look at somebody like Martel. All right, these are obviously the two main infantry commanders that are in season 1. Pyrrhus has a single target damage factor and a little bit of bonus to normal damage. He also gives you some march speed when he's not expertise, which is nice. Martel, on the other hand, is raw stats and damage and white numbers. He has no damage factor, but he has a ton of counterattack damage, and if you get him expertise, which as free to play is going to take probably about 4 to 5 years, I'm just being honest, okay, then you get march speed on him as well. It's 20%, which is fantastic. Okay, this is, you could run these in an absolute pinch if you have to, but again, you really, if you can avoid it, you should avoid it. Okay, so this is going to be how I would recommend doing this. All right, I'm going to leave all these commanders here. You now have a couple of free to play budget options that you can throw behind your Liu Che, and hopefully get some semi decent reports with them in a pinch. Like I said, maybe it's your first season of Conquest or something like that. You just don't have anything else, but you need to run an infantry march. You can go ahead and do that. All right, finally, last up, Emperor Qin. All right, as I said before, and in many videos so far, this in my opinion is the best commander in the game right now, and therefore I do think he needs to be expertise. There's really no way around it. All of his skills they feed off of one another, and they propel his rage engine and help him consume even more. And so that is he's the cream of the crop. You got to expertise him. All right, there's no way around it. If you are a returning player and you quit, you come back to the game, get Emperor Qin. If you get a single commander in this entire video, it's Emperor Qin. Okay, and if you still got YSG from back in the day, great news. Slap them together and you are Gucci gang. YSG has a tier 3 relic upgrade for 20% defense and 12% skill damage on top of the 50% skill damage he already has, which gives Emperor Qin a total of 62 additional skill damage, which is absolutely insane. Emperor Qin also has a lot of great things on his kit in terms of 20% march speed, 30% defense, 20% health. It's actually nuts, his stat distribution here on the second skill. It is very, very good. So Emperor Qin is doing all the heavy lifting here, and YSG is just giving him another 5 target AoE and a bunch of skill damage. It says, here you go, here's a little rage engine on the second skill. Do work. Okay, that's how that goes. Also, like I said with infantry before, there is museum relics for Martel, and there's also museum relics for Alexander the Great, and also for Pyrrhus, wherever Pyrrhus might be. He gets 30% defense, 10% skill damage. The skill damage won't matter for Liu Che, but just wanted to point it out here. Okay, so don't forget about the museum relics if you're using these older commanders. Like, you need the relics if you're going to rock the older commanders, okay, because you're already at a mega disadvantage. This is like a non-negotiable. If you're even going to try to use the budget friendly stuff, you need probably the corresponding museum relic. Okay, now of course the cream of the crop here is Zhuge Liang. He himself is so good. Prior to Emperor Qin coming out, he was easily the best archer in the game, right? So now that Emperor Qin's in the game, he just falls from number 1 and number 2. So you just pair those two together and you're popping off. The downside, this needs to be expertise as well. You need the rage engine on that expertise, and so, you know, it is what it is. These are two commanders that need to be expertise, which is why we talked about the archers last, right? Because here with cavalry, you could get away with 2 commanders that are not expertise, and you would feel pretty good about that, right? And get a lot of the value. With infantry, you could get away with 1 commander not being expertise, the other one had to be expertise, and with archers you kind of need both expertise. Same thing even with YSG, he's kind of got to be expertise, right? He's only free to play friendly if you have him from back in the day when you used to play and you didn't swap him, or you let the game come back, whatever. By the way, if you come back and you do have that swap event, get Emperor Qin and probably King Arthur, okay, or Emperor Qin with Zhuge Liang if you could swing it. Beyond that, I'm just going to mention this here because it is technically a little bit more budget friendly than the other things, but if you bring in a Hermann Prime at 5551, you might be able to try something like this. Again, I'm just mentioning it here because Hermann Prime is a budget build at 5551. He's also spreading the poison stacks, which you really like, and he's got a half circle AoE. He's got march speed. It's kind of you know, that's the biggest leg up he has on the other options here, is these two are mega slow. This gives you more march speed, so it's definitely a route you could go. But again, investing in Hermann Prime these days, if in a single march, you're probably not going to run Hermann Prime unless you already had him. He's more for a 2 army lineup at this point for archers. And finally, if we're scraping the bottom of the barrel, once again, I'm going to warn you, if you use gold key commanders, do so at your own risk, but the best option that you would have here would be somebody like Thutmose. Okay, Thutmose also has a skill damage 3 target AoE. It ain't much, but it's honest work. He also gives your Emperor Qin an insane amount of stats when you consider the fact that Emperor Qin himself has no attack, right? He has defense and health. So okay, here you go. Here's 45% attack on top of all the damage you're already dealing, which is wild, and then another 20% of health to boot. But wait, there's more. Thutmose has stats of his own. He already has 15% attack, right? So it's not 45% attack, it's 60% attack. You also get 15% damage outside of territory, which is really good. Also 10% defense, so even more stats, which is wild. And you have a chance of making the target take more skill damage for 3 seconds. You're pumping out insane skill damage with Emperor Qin, so that is very good stuff. The 4th skill is a little bit of anti-swarm punishment to your target, which you already have a ton of built in with your Emperor Qin. And finally, the expertise, if you have it. You probably won't as free to play, but if you did, whenever you use that active skill, you gain a 30% bonus to normal damage, and of course this is 1,000 damage factor AoE. So again, you're scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of damage factor here, right? But the rest of the kit, I mean, honestly, he has more stats than most commanders in the Season of Conquest. I mean, it's just objectively, he has an insane amount of stats and some all damage. It's honestly really solid, especially at 5551. You get all the stat points possible here, and I think that's a really solid budget build. Once again, if you wanted to, you could throw Mehmed in here. The thing with Mehmed though is, again, he's got no march speed compared to some of these other budget build options. He does give you a lot more skill damage and health though, which is quite good, and he also has a 5 target AoE. No rage engine, unfortunately, like you have on some of these other commanders, which Emperor Qin really likes, but again, it is definitely a place that you could throw Mehmed if you wanted to. Just be aware he's kind of slow. Now I did say earlier that there is a fourth pillar that you could consider as a free-to-play player, and that's going to be ranged commanders. Now I spent the majority of the video talking about infantry, archers, and cavalry because I do think, wow, we got this beautiful golden sunbeam coming right through the smallest crack in my curtains. Jesus. Now the reason that I spent the majority of the first part of the video talking about infantry, cavalry, and archers is because I do think that those are a little bit more important, just because you kind of need to be able to move around the open field if what you want to do is push with your allies, right? If the whole name of the game, the whole name of KVK, the whole point of it is territory dominance, right? You want to push your enemy out of territory and you want to expand your territory, right? And that requires movement, that requires joining rallies, joining garrisons, and unfortunately with range, they're not as mobile as the other troop types, and there's also not any rallies or garrisons happening with siege units, and so you're not as helpful in that way. But there is still really good use for ranged commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, especially as a free-to-play player. I would say if you do want to get ranged commanders, I would say don't invest in them until you have at least 2 other pairs of commanders that you can use. So whether it's 1 archer and 1 infantry pair, or 1, you know, archer and 1 cavalry pair, or 1 cav and 1 infantry. Ideally, if you want a ranged march, which honestly the gameplay isn't for everybody, so do a little bit of research and look up some other creators like Mr. Siege, Dark Siege. These other creators will tell you a lot more about and show you more about how ranged works. Some of you might really like that style of gameplay, some of you might not like all the micromanagement and the slow movement and waiting and setting up and tearing down. But all of that to say, those are my qualifying reasons as to why I saved ranged for last. It is undoubtedly the case that you can get some pretty good reports with some cheap investments in ranged commanders. Now the main guy, Gonzalo de Cordoba, all right, this dude pops off because he has ranged AoE damage, okay, and you really could get good use out of him at 5511, or you could try to do something like 5551 or 5515. The thing is, a lot of the skills here with Cordoba trigger when he is hit with a basic attack, which ideally you want to avoid, but at 5551 at least you get all the defense, right? Guaranteed stats, kind of nice. But the fourth skill, you take less ranged counterattack damage, which is a lot of the damage that you're going to be taking anyway. So we know you're going to need Cordoba, and there's a couple of options that you have when it comes to pairing with him. Of course, the cream of the crop is Gaj Armada. The problem is I kind of feel like he needs to be expertise, and you guys can let me know in the comment section below if that's wrong. Obviously I do not use ranged units, but it seems like all of his skills kind of have something that are good. So that brings us to Margaret, right? And Margaret was like the first, as soon as Cordoba came out, I was like, oh, Margaret primary, right? That could actually work because you get a ton of normal damage bonus for 3 seconds and then you fire the active skill of your Cordoba. The cool thing about Margaret is that you could run her at 5511. You don't really care about the range skill damage on the 3rd skill here. The 4th skill, you still get a defense reduction on the target. Even at 1, it's still 20%, which is pretty good. So honestly, you could rock something like this and feel pretty good about that for a really cheap budget build, and you'll have a pretty good use for your siege units if your kingdom lets you have any. Now I know some people try to use budget builds with Julius Caesar because he gives you a ton of march speed and all damage with his museum relic. I'm not an expert on range, so I'm going to point you again towards the ranged content creators if you want to go more in depth with that, but I did feel like it was necessary to at least include them in this video because it is objectively a really good value for your sculptures if you're interested in that type of gameplay. But guys, that's going to do it for today's video. If you made it all the way to the end, consider dropping a thumbs up on it. It really helps out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. While you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video, and let me know in the comment section below your favorite free-to-play armies that you use in Rise of Kingdoms. But guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I will talk to you guys again soon. Peace.